by accident.
Oh yeah, no. If you take the GPMG and the Wrangle's far better weapon than the GPMG. Because at 1,000 yards, the Wrangle, if you hit someone, 1,000 yards of the GPMG, you just spray it, you might hit them. So a good crew with a brand.
So you can't bring 6 ways, yeah, so you could almost use it.
Yeah, and that's if you had a good brand, if you had a good fire and a good number 2 supreme magazines, you will do a lot of damage. Whereas the GPMG you're spraying, you're not doing that damage. You just keep
that's an outfield there. What's that more outfields? So
Actually, look at that one.
Show you now.
Can't be done. Can't be done. See, can't be done. You got use it. No, so we just had to go. Siema. Może też na bieżąco.
Oh, it's just for the lights. Having lights.
The office centre, yeah. No,
I don't know what.
I thought there was a medical reason for it.
Oh, no. It's just you have some just in case.
That's a missile. Look, the aim is there.
Yes.
The guys that are walking out there.
Yeah. kind of a spring thing.
Huh?
Everybody who knows down there, I'm afraid. Come on down.
It's over this way, guys, please.
Those guys down there, either out in the park or down here. That'd be acceptable. Well, we're taking off in that corner. We're right up that corner. So if anything happens, that's where we're going to end up putting it down. So sorry, folks. I can take you all the way right down here. You need to back towards the track. We generate a lot more wind than you expect. I want to go.
There was your opportunity to go out there.
Same rule up there.
We'll make our way back up to your location there, and if we can get to the Avenue by 1 to the your location in about 10 minutes, we'll go for
Roger, Kid 821, meet you up here in the next 10 minutes. Just confirm the helicopter taking off there shortly now, over.
Yeah, that's affirmative. All cars push back into the food take off for the next
2178 Andros, leave anything. Tornado. Kid 19 mobile, 1.
from miles around. You will hear them sing. Come on, you lot to see, clapping your hands. The sun's shining in Listowel, everyone. Hey, roll out the barrel. Come on, we'll have a barrel of fun. Roll out the barrel. We've got the blues on the run. Sing, move to rebel, bringing out a song of good cheer. And now's the time to roll the barrel for the gangs of it's the big surprise, the metaphor, and all the couples they form harmony. From miles around, you'll hear them sing, bling, boo, ba, dee, doo, da, 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 da. Come on. Roll it out, roll it out, roll out the barrel. Da 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 da. Sing a song of good cheer, 'cause the whole gang is here. Roll it up, let's do the beer barrel polka. Cheers! Thank you very much indeed for seeing the dance this evening. It's €20 a ticket. You've got a night full of entertainment, and it starts at 9 o'clock. If you would like a CD album recording of the Bomb Shovels, come and see us after the concert, and we'll see you later. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, bye-bye.
Come back 80 years. This is a little sleepy French town on the northern coast of Normandy. From the start, the actual invasion, a lot of small towns were completely missed and bypassed, and the invasion, the Allies had key objectives. Once they actually got onto the beaches, there was very little the Germans could do. Our air power was more or less non-existent, and the Allies ruled the sky, so we could be very little moved during the daytime for the Germans. Most of the stuff they had to move at night. And from the offset, the supplies, fuel, it was not non-existent. As you know yourself in your history books, they refused to wake up Hitler. He was fast asleep. He'd taken a sleeping pill and gone to bed. And only he could allow the armour, panzer armours, which were based just outside Paris, around the Seine area, to move up to the Normandy front. So in towns like this, there was probably very few German troops. They knew the invasion was coming to a point. I mean, they were across the far side of the Channel in the UK. There was thousands and thousands of troops and ships massing, like a giant spring waiting to come across. So once they did come across, they started moving slowly. The thing with the Germans was, even though they were well outnumbered, they had very good equipment, and what they were very good at was, especially when the Allies would advance, they would withdraw a little bit, or they'd counter-attack. And sometimes when the Allies said, oh, hey, look, we've captured this town, come that evening, the Germans had chucked them back out again. So they were very well respected in that sense. And it wasn't until, I think, after the first 4 or 5 days, before they were literally stunned into the firepower that the Allies threw at them, that they actually got themselves together in small units. But there was nothing like what they had in the early years. So, as I said, from the very foot, they were always on the back foot. I mean, the Allies were nearly all motorised. Well, they were all motorised. The Germans were still using horse and carts, anything they could get their hands on to get up to the front. I remember many years ago I spoke to a veteran who was in the Waffen-SS, and he said they pinched a car in Paris, loaded it up with all their equipment, 3 of them, and managed to drive up to the Normandy front. So that'll show you what the situation was like. Anyway, that's a brief history rundown. So we're nearly there, a couple of more minutes, and the battle should commence. Just to run you through some of the vehicles in the town. This one here, an Opel Blitz, is an original, and behind that is the Kübelwagen, which is the German VW Beetle, basically. It was the wartime Beetle. The Kubelwagen was built in 1945, that particular model, in around about the 14th of February, so it was very late in the war. That was the amazing thing with the Germans. They were still able to produce just enough weapons, just enough fuel, just enough ammunition to keep things going and to keep the war going, even when they were being pounded, you know, day and night. They often found, unfortunately for some of the civilians in France, the unlucky ones, their town was completely leveled. So, you know, you lost everything. You lost your house, you lost everything due to the Allied bombing, that they had to literally carpet bomb some of these small villages. And then when the actual ground forces arrived to come in, there was just enough Germans seemed to climb out of the rubble or use the rubble as a defensive position and managed to stop them. The Germans had you probably have heard of it, the 88mm gun, which was made by Krupp. It was a very effective weapon. In fact, even today, it's still a very feared weapon. A small screen of these could stop a whole Allied advance. They could actually hit a Sherman tank, which would have been the bulk of what the Allies would have had, without them even seeing it. And once the tank was struck, it was just blown to pieces. So sometimes they could have 4 or 5 of these on high ground. With war, you never know what's going to happen. It's always expect the unexpected, and I think on the case with the Germans, you had to unexpect what they were going to do. All right, machine guns had a better rate of fire. They had very superior mortars. They had the feared Nebelwerfer, which you probably saw down in the field, which is worth having a look. This was an actual mortar, and the Allies feared them very much. They made a terrible screaming noise when they fired. And a barrage of these could literally devastate a town. Very effective. But the Germans, as I said, were very good at turning a bad situation. When things were lost, they seemed to rally around and get together and turn the situation around. So, I think we're nearly there. You're probably fed up listening to me. The battle will start. Basically what's going to happen in the battle, as I said, the town is fairly sleepy at the moment. There's a few Germans garrisoned in it. Nothing much. We've had reports of fighting in different areas, but nothing coming this way. So basically the Allied attack is going to be a surprise attack. The Germans are going to be kind of stunned, a few of them killed, but as they always do, they're going to counter-attack and come back with a much, much larger force. The main group of guys that are here, there's a couple of groups. The main group, as you see it on the truck, is Battle Group Centre. Now, we're based in Ballymacarbery. We're actually a dedicated reenactment group. Now, I'm going to switch off now because here comes the Allies. The gun you saw firing there is a pack. It's actually an anti-tank gun. It was made earlier during the war, but like a lot of things, it was pressed into service and used right throughout the end of the war, including the truck you see here is a Mercedes truck. It was actually pre-war. The Germans then mostly used it on airfields for fuel and stuff like that, but they didn't scrap the vehicles. They generally kept them pressed into service right throughout the whole of them. Our Allied troops today are mostly made up of 101st, the Airborne, and the 82nd Airborne. They were dropped in 2 layers in Normandy, from the causeways inland. Their job was to secure bridges. On the night of the 5th, the Pathfinders were dropped. And their job was to put in radio transmitters for the main wave of planes coming in. And then again, they all had their own objectives, but with dropping airborne troops, you tend to get scattered all over the place, like on weather like this in the wind. You could end up anywhere. A lot of them ended up in rivers, drowned. The Germans flooded an awful lot of fields and land inland, which was also a problem. But for the amount that was there, they fought very, very hard and very well, and earned the respect of the Germans when any of them ever got captured. They were fairly tough hombres. In fact, back during the war, sometimes with village to village, I was talking to one veteran, a British Armoured Division, they said they picked up the phone and rang the next village, and a German answered the phone. So that's how close the fighting was. The Germans, as I said, were always on the back foot, and their objective was to try and get, at one stage, was to get as many men they could across the Seine, across the far side. They had an awful lot of their armour in Rouen in the port, and that was heavily bombed, and they lost a huge amount of armour. I mean, for people have to understand, I talked to one veteran, and he said to me, when he was captured, that was the chap who went up to Paris in the car, he actually got caught on the far side of Caen by a barrage. He got lost at night on a reconnaissance patrol. He said the weather was a bit foggy in that morning, and he walked around a corner and there was a Sherman tank, so he didn't know what to do. He said he was on his own, he'd lost contact with the other 2 guys he was with, so he climbed under a hedge and he slept there for the night. There was Canadian troops in the town. He literally said, what will I do? So he just got out from the hedge, put his hands in the air, they all swung around, couldn't believe, where did you come from, where did you pop up from? He said, I've been hiding. He had no English, so they literally stood him in the middle of the field, pointed the tank at him, and then the Germans opened up from the far side of the town with their heavy mortars and mortared the whole town. He was then marched on down to the beachheads, down to the landing area, and he said even at that stage, he just looked at the amount of supplies. He said, he had very poor English, he said to me, they had like spare tyres that were literally the size of the pyramids in Egypt. He said the amount of supplies and equipment pouring in through on the Allied beaches, he said he knew then they were lost. There was no way that they could possibly put up with this sort of manpower and supplies that the Allies had pouring inland, and it was only due to things like bad weather. There was a very heavy storm in the port. The weather was probably similar to what it is now. It was kind of very blustery, gusty, and that would delay the supplies going inland, and that was the problem. The Allies were able to roll in as far as they could go, and then they just literally ran out of supplies. Back to the battle here. Because we have some German nurses who are tending there to some of the Allied paratroopers and some of the guys who are wounded. These were actually German nurses. They were seconded into the German army as helpers. Now obviously they were unarmed. All medical personnel didn't carry any weapons. And then one of the chaps that's near to them there is a British paratrooper. Their uniforms are very, very similar to the Americans. You see he's got a red beret in his pocket. I think our wounded man is just about able to stand at this stage.
The Americans top half the square. Top half, okay? Then mean they're fighting me back down, okay? Top half, okay? Then mean they're fighting me back down. Watch that outside. Attack one coming out!
Of course, as you all know, the big thing that won the war was the Enigma machine. The Allies had cracked the codes earlier during the war, so nearly anything the Germans generally sent, they actually knew what was going to happen before the Germans did. They were able to read them. The only time that the things didn't go well was when the Germans used landlines and runners and communication. So that was the big thing for the Battle of Normandy, and it was kept a secret, as you probably know, I think up until 1975, when it was actually released with the Official Secrets Act. But they kept, the Enigma machine really was the machine that won the war. They were able to listen into all the messages. Apart from that, after Normandy, there was a lot of generals that were captured and brought to the UK, and they had them billeted, I can't remember the name of the place exactly, in a hotel, but they had listening devices in all the rooms, and it was very interesting to listen to what way the Germans were talking and thinking, and any secrets that they'd known that they were telling them. So things like this all helped the Allies in a huge way to win the war. The Enigma machine was the big winner, though. The fact that they could listen to any communication signals, what the Germans were up to. The only time the advantage ever really went with the Germans was when they talked on landline, or weather was the other thing as well in those days. People seem to say, what's the weather? You turn on Sky News, you've got the weather instantly. But of course in those days you actually had to go out and find your own weather. The Germans used to have long-range condors which could fly, a lot of them did fly over this area out to the Atlantic to get weather readings, and that all advanced the battle, whether the battle went ahead or not. Ireland obviously was neutral during the war, and as you know, there's many planes that did crash here. Their airmen were returned in the Curragh. A lot of them were reconnaissance flights out over the Atlantic to pick up the weather systems for battles back in Europe. What's happening now is the Germans have actually gone off. They're having a recon patrol. They'll come back, obviously with force. As we were saying earlier on, they're very good at turning a bad situation around and turning it in their favour. The other problem they had also was orders were coming from the top. As you know, Hitler had gone deranged at this stage, and he wanted every man to stand and fight and die in the battlefield, and that was the problem. You know, often when situations could have been turned around, if they'd retreated, often some of the orders were disobeyed. And that was the problem. Same in Russia, they were ordered to stand and fight to the last man, the last bullet, and they were literally just wiped out. And also a lot of the troops, the main fighting troops, had been lost in the front of the war. The main attrition was Russia. Russia was just a mincing machine, and most of the elite divisions, especially like some of the guys here in Ireland with the Leibstandarte, they fought in Russia, but a lot of the big SS divisions were wiped out there with the Russians. The Leibstandarte they were in Italy, and then they were also in Normandy as well. They were more, at the end of the war, they were more like a fire brigade. They were rushing from village to village, town to town, to try and turn situations around for the Allies, or for the Germans, to turn the situation around in their favour. But they were only clusters of guys. They weren't the calibre. Also an awful lot of young guys were pressed into this time of the service of the German army. They were literally only boys. Some of them were quite fanatical. I've heard stories of them running up against tanks with no possible way of knocking out the tank with a pistol, a Luger, and they were just literally mown down. But the situation once in Normandy had turned, that was really the end. There was no way they were going to get out. The Falaise pocket, this was an area in France, the Allies called it like a bag. It formed like a pocket, and they literally caught the Germans in the pocket and then closed it. And they literally sent in fighter bombers, Typhoons, rocket-firing planes, and literally killed thousands. You've often probably seen the black and white pictures of horses. The Germans still use an awful lot of horse-drawn equipment, and you'd see them, the poor horses lying in heaps in the road, the hedgerows. Falaise was just an absolute killing ground. Even some of the Typhoon pilots who actually went to visit the area of the destruction, they said they just couldn't believe what they saw. They said they were looking at armour destroyed, bodies up on roofs. They literally obliterated the German army, and it was only the remnants of that I said that escaped to the Seine and got back. The ammunition that the guys are firing is blank ammunition, and it's actually much louder than a normal live round. For accident, they're generally supposed to be about a metre away from the next soldier firing. They do wear air protection.
Two of them are down already. Yeah. No, there is a real bullet. They're not even moving now.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's nearly coming to a conclusion. I think there's a couple of Americans still left.
They're starting to win. No, is he? One of them. He don't. One of them's a prisoner.
The other thing faced with the Germans is, one funny thing is, you watch them here fighting, if you look at the soles of their shoes, they're wearing hobnail boots with steel cleats on them. And often when they come into towns, if you look at black and white footage, you see a few of them coming proper, slipping, come around the corner. Because obviously with the hobnails, they'll be useless on hard roads or anything slippery surface. If you wear them yourself, it can be quite tricky at times.
No, they're not taking off. No, they're not all together. They're all together. Why there? Why there? Outside.
Germans also had a range of weapons in the mines and stuff like this, so when they often pulled out of a town, they'd leave the town completely mined. They'd leave mines everywhere. Often they'd leave things like a German helmet lying on the ground. The guy would go to pick it up, bang. They had glass mines, which were made of glass, which a metal detector wouldn't pick up. So if you stood on it, you were a gunner. They also had what they called a shoe mine, which was a small wooden box with a trigger on it. They'd often have wide telemines, which are actually anti-vehicle mines that actually run thin wire from a series of these. So if one vehicle went in, it exploded. There's often cases like obviously when the tanks came into a town, they'd pick off the lead tank or the second tank. Unlike the film Fury with Brad Pitt, when that tank, actually Tiger tank, knocked out those first tanks, it was rubbish, because in reality, well, they would have knocked out the lead vehicle, the second one, and the last one of the convoy was trapped. The tanks couldn't reverse, turn off the road, and one by one they just picked them off. In reality, the Germans, with tanks wise, they'd very little come the end of the war. You were literally looking at maybe a 20-to-1, even a higher ratio at that stage. So even though the Tiger tank was a very good tank, they were just outnumbered by the Sherman. And then of course the Sherman also had the gun on it. I think the Firefly was the one was fitted with a larger gun. I don't know what caliber it is, but that one was more effective. As you know, the Tiger was fitted with an 88mm gun. Right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. The battle's over. Put your hands together. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I didn't bore the pants off you talking about World War II.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. Thanks for all your help. And a big round of applause, and thanks to all our battle reenactors. They were brilliant today. Thank you very much. Just a few little things. As said, we have the hangar dance on tonight inside the Arms Hotel. Tickets are still available for it with the bombshell bells. Behind you there we have got the bouncy castle for all the kids. And also down in Lynch's Field, just down the Bridge Road, we have the Living History Park, which is still open. You can go down and go visit that then as well. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for all your help. It's been a lovely evening here, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
I was maybe in about
The other problem with the invasion also, once the troops had got themselves off the beaches and started to push inland, it took a different type of fighting. Once you got into the towns, it was street to street, and sometimes it came down hand to hand fighting, especially through buildings. Good example is Italy, Monte Cassino. If you know Italy at all, the casino was very high up in the hills, and the Allies heavily bombed the area, carpet bombed it. The actual Monte Cassino itself was just a ruin, but for some reason they could not get the Germans out of that ruin, and I think they held them up probably for about 4 weeks. They finally got them to move. Very stubborn resistance. Earlier on in my job, being at Rommel, I was brought back from Italy after coming back from the desert. Rommel was quite ill after the fighting in Africa, and finally the Americans at the Kasserine Pass destroyed what was left of the German army there. Brought back to Europe, my job was to basically make Europe a fortress. So basically from Norway down to Spain, there's supposed to be 1 million mines planted and defences. Now the defences in places like the ports were very strong. Places they were just quite thin, they were just barbed wire fences, but inevitably it was impossible to guard that sort of area from an invasion, so the Germans never really knew where it was coming. In fact, Rommel was on his way in an open-top car, and the road he was on was called Montgomery Road, and he was strapped by low-flying Spitfire to take down, and he was badly wounded. The car spun off the road. He was heavily wounded and was taken out of the battlefield for a while. Meanwhile, events had changed back in Germany. As you know, the bomb plot to kill Hitler. Unfortunately, Rommel's name is alleged was mentioned by one of the guys in the hospital that was wounded, and to this day people say Rommel wasn't involved. A lot of people say he was. So basically they said to him, you could take the easy way out and we'll send you off to somewhere where you won't be coming back. So he took the easy way out, and they said he died of his wounds in a hospital, and he was given a hero's state burial. To this day Rommel is still regarded quite highly in Germany. He wasn't a Nazi. He was a career soldier. He fought in the First World War, and he also fought in the Second World War. But he's still very, very liked. In military circles, people speak highly of him.
No, it's people are shouting.
Probably see a lot of the German troops. Some of them, one or two are wearing, notice the jackboot. You'll see some of the guys, they wear like a gaiter, like the Allies. Again, that was an economy measure. As the war progressed, uniforms, the German content of a uniform was only about 5%. The rest of it was made of torn up rags that were repulped, wood fibre. So those tunics were quite itchy. In fact, some of the German soldiers actually laughed if they fell into a river that actually float. Also, they still used a lot of leather in their equipment, like their Y straps and stuff like that. As with the Allies, they'd gone up to using webbing equipment, which is a lot more practical and stronger.
Why are they shooting over there?
The Germans have more or less cleared the town now. They've turned the situation around. The Allies have retreated off.
No, there's the other people back there. But the other people aren't actually other army men. They're all the same team, but they're showing how they fight. Because when somebody was need to go on the helicopter and fight on the rear, and they gone, you know? And I saw. Oh no, someone's down. They have to help. It's so hot.
To the battle, if any of you want to come down to the field and ask any questions, please do. The guys there will be very helpful to any questions you have, or ask about any of the tanks, or sorry, not tanks, vehicles that are down there. They'll explain to you or give you a run through what the different working devices are in them. Any of the awards that they have on the uniforms or the rank markings, they'll tell you exactly what they are and what they stand for. gentlemen, please stay on that side until the battle's actually finished. This is with the vehicle movement, it's very difficult.
They die on me. Yeah? They aren't killing people for real. Yeah, they aren't. Yeah, they aren't.
Even at this stage of the war, the Germans had some super developments. They'd worked on various things. Rockets were the main thing they were working on. Everybody thought Hitler was going to come up with the atomic bomb, but thank God he didn't. The V2 rocket was very feared. The port of Antwerp was completely unusable. They fired an awful lot of them at the port. These were mobile. They were very similar to the Scud missiles that were used in the Iraq War. They were literally, you could put them on a trailer, bring them to a park, an open area, and then fire them. The other predecessor of that was the V1 rocket, which came off on a skid, but it was only until the actual launching grounds of these were overrun by the Allies that they stopped falling. Primarily the targets for those was London. And again with the Germans, the funny thing about them was they had spies in countries, but the information that used to come back was usually false information, and they knew who they were. So they were often told in instances that the actual V1s weren't landing where they were supposed to be landing, so they were actually landing short of their target. And also the proximity fuse, which the British guns were then firing at that stage, were able to shoot them down. They were actually quite difficult. If the Germans had put some sort of a chinking device that it would fly up, down, sideways, would have been a lethal weapon, but in fact they just flew straight. When they ran out of fuel, they just dropped. In fact, my own mother, funny enough, when she lived in London during the war, saw a few of them come over. Luckily they literally went over your head and kept on going, and that was the happiest thing for you because they weren't going to land where you were. With the V2, there was no warning, it just landed and that was it. In fact, my father was working in London in a school repairing bomb damage, and he told me at the time they were up in the top of the school, in these red brick Victorian schools, and he said the ground just shook, literally shook. There was a massive explosion. They ran outside to see what it was, and they literally about 6 or 7 streets were just completely levelled, and they reckoned, well, they were told afterwards that was a V2 had hit, and they just got out of it at that stage. But at that stage of the war they were calling them V weapons or vengeance weapons that the Germans were firing across the channel, but it was only until their sites were overrun completely. Even from Holland they could launch the V2, which would go into ballistics, so there's no way you could stop it once it had gone. Also jet aircraft. The Germans did have limited range of jet aircraft. The ME-626 is probably the most famous one. The Jet Top 990 was very good at the time, and they had a couple of squadrons of these that they actually used, but Hitler wanted a fighter bomber or something to hit back. The fact that they had nothing in a large bomber to actually hit back at the Allies, he ordered this plane to be turned into a bomber, which was, as a fighter, was useless. Again, the main problem they had was pilots. Most of the pilots had been killed. Any of the experienced guys, any of the guys they had from bombers were transferred, some of them over to fly the jets, and it was just suicide. I mean, the jets were very hard to fly. Again, they couldn't. The main problem with the ME-262 was trying to get it to slow down. It flew at a tremendous speed, and the Allies knew this. So what the jet actually do is circle the airfield to actually bring its airspeed down. So the Americans literally had fighter bombers that would literally hang around the airfields and wait for the jet. It was very vulnerable taking off as well, and they'd often used to pounce on them at that stage. But no matter what they had, weapons-wise, and the new weapons coming on stream, they were obviously in Norway, they were trying heavy water, which was trying to get the nuclear fission. They didn't have enough of the raw materials. Thank God they didn't get an atomic bomb going. The most feared thing, I think, was the U-boats. They were still used by the Germans and were still out in the Atlantic. They had different types, and the last one that they had didn't have to submerge. It could stay under all the time, and a lot of them were still out there even at the cessation of the war. They were told to surrender and come in, so they would be the last personnel. A lot of them were surrendered. The North Atlantic came into Listowel up in Northern Ireland. You often see black and white pictures of them all tied up against the quay dock there, and the Germans surrendered. They actually took a lot of them then off the coast to destroy them. A lot of them are still sunk out there, but that was the biggest fear. I think Churchill wrote in his memoirs at one stage that the U-boat menace was unbelievable because they were sinking more ships than the Allies could build them. Also, a lot of U-boat crews lost their lives as well out in the Atlantic.
No? They do. No. Look, they're not even moving. One is not moving. No, that's because he's alive. No?